terrible truths, but because they've been lied to extensively for the last, well, going back to the Vietnam War, primarily the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, and stolen blind. And so I sort of view it the other way. If you want people to stop being paranoid and stop being distrustful of the government and stop arming themselves, you need to start telling the truth. You start telling the truth and things will get better. And acknowledging the ET presence is a big one, and that'll get the ball rolling. Hopefully it'll lead to a, how would you say, a reformist era where the truth becomes standard operating procedure. Holding back, waiting, somehow keeping the secret longer, I don't think it's going to make it any better. It's only going to get worse. So and the last thing I'll say is this. You know, ATs aren't just here for the Americans. They didn't come all this way because this America thing. We gotta tell them the truth, right? They're here. They're engaged in the entire planet. We represent 5% of the world's population, and it comes down to this. It doesn't really matter whether the Americans are ready or not, or the Bangladeshis, or the French, or the Russians. They're going to deal with it whether they like it or not, because it's going to happen whether they like it or not. It's unavoidable and inevitable.
Make a point, Stephen, that the ETs are not visitors, for God's sake.
Well, again,
they're not just visiting here. They've been here from the beginning of our history.
But that distinction doesn't affect my political point.
Well, it ought to.
Why? I'm talking about extraterrestrials in the sense of non-human beings as we understand them, with technology beyond what we have. Whether they're from the inner Earth, from another dimension, from the past, from the other star systems, Occam's razor would say from other star systems, wherever they're from, right? It is a major event and a significant thing for the world's population to know this. And that crossing point, when that self-acknowledgement occurs, is a big deal. Now, the particulars, we know there's a huge sub-story here. We know that behind this is a massive story. It's huge and broad. And everybody is trying to understand it. And everybody knows a little about it and a little here and so forth. Nobody knows the full story. Nobody's got it all right. They know a little piece. And the dilemma is that the political process or the social transition is not about figuring the whole thing out and bringing it out in the public and putting it there and saying, here, we can't do that. Disclosure is nothing more than the first step towards that process. Because once the governments formally acknowledge this reality, and the schools can teach it, and the philanthropists can fund it, and the media can cover it, and the intellectuals can discuss it, then we can start sorting the whole damn thing out and say, this is nonsense, that's not true, this person's a fraud, that person's the real deal, that story's good, that story's bad, and actually create a real history of this issue as best we can. But until disclosure takes place, that's not going to happen. We're going to continue to, churn and churn and churn. And remember that this arena, this hall of smoke and mirrors we're in, we didn't build it. The government built it. The government put those mirrors up, put the smoke in the hall. They have deliberately made it very difficult, if not impossible, to have a clear understanding. That was a government policy. We have to end that policy. And disclosure is the end of that policy. And that's disclosure with a capital D. A formal acknowledgement of the ET presence. That's it, nothing more. Disclosure with a small d has been going on for a long time, no question. An unfolding of information, citizen process, misinformation, all mixed in. That's small d, all right? That's been happening, absolutely no question. But in spite of all that, quote, disclosure with a small d, do the universities teach it? Does the press properly cover it? Does the government fund it? Do we have, think tanks devoted to it? No, we don't. What government does matter. What Obama and the administration does matters. And so they have to act. You can't ignore government, right? People want peace. And they say, well, I want peace, so the government doesn't matter until the government comes and takes your son or your daughter and sends them off to war. What government does matters. And so we have to engage it, and we have to deal with the process using the institutions we have to get the proper result.
You all are aware of the Pandora's box story, the legend going back in ancient Greece. Pandora's box had all the furies and hell of the entire world, locked and sealed. You open Pandora's box just a little tiny bit, and all hell breaks loose because you can't release just a little tiny bit.
Right.
If you release just one little tiny bit, you've got a million questions and a million pissed off people wanting to know the rest of it. And I don't believe that our government at this moment is in any position to even begin to tell them the rest of the story. Because do you know about the impact on theology? You know what the Brookings report said? You try to tell people out there that Jesus of Nazareth was one of them, and the evidence we've all had is yes, he was. Now, how do you tell that to fundamentalists? Look, the Muslim world right now.
The Brookings report, that was in 1961.
61, yes.
I mean, now we have 2009.
It's
and
still
let me say something as a kind of representative of the younger generation.
Robert, it is still policy, sadly enough.
Okay. Maybe, you know, in many generations, it's a problem for many generations, obviously. But I have to tell you, I belong to a younger generation. I know many people my age and younger. You know, for them, it's not so. You know, unimaginable. It's not so, you know, when you say, you know, the American government or certain people in the military-industrial complex covering that up, you know, they say, all right, yeah, I can imagine that. You know, it's not a big deal for them.
Okay, let me, hello.
It's a question
Let me interrupt.
You're exceptional.
We're going on the air.
You're not typical.
We're going on the air. Bill, are you announcing? Are we on the air?
I think it's the commercial. Yep.
Well, we should be on the air at the moment, according to the time.
We have an audio set up in the room here now, which is streaming directly to the computer. We've got an audio engineer here and we're ready to go.
He's setting up on.
As soon as these mics are feeding into the computer, the radio show should be able to hear us. Ask Mel if she can hear me talking right now.
What happened here is that Danny at the radio show assumed that we weren't going to be able to do it right, so they set up the encore anyway. They didn't know we had an audio engineer here.
But I thought Mel handled that. So is he interruptible? Can she call him on the phone?
Yes, I've asked.
Type in Skype.
It's all happening. Mel's calling the radio show right now.
Okay.
To break off from the encore and to go to the
Okay, when that happens, then we'll stop again. Just motion at me and we'll go ahead, you guys. Let's continue this. The younger generation, you want to say something, Ryan?
Yes, what I wanted to say is that it seems like the problem, you know, we obviously have a tiger by the tail here. And that we all recognize that anger is an initial reaction once disclosure really unfolds with a capital D. And so we need, if we can recognize this, and our so-called adversaries, let's say those, the keepers of the secrets, can sit down at a table and negotiate the release of the information that would not, where in their perception it wouldn't hurt them that much. Just maybe that's the opening. It seems like that's the nub of the issue, is that the cover-up and the incrustation of cover-ups going on for the last 65 years has created this Pandora's box, which, if opened, could lead to a process of truth and reconciliation, which would just perhaps launch us into the new paradigm, which is so badly needed anyway, in order to save our precious planet. So that's the way I'd like to see it, is to provide the basis for some sort of negotiation or a process of truth and reconciliation, to be able to create certain levels of amnesty and
You want us to forgive the sinners, do you?
Well, eventually,
It's
yes.
going to happen then.
We do it all the time.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry.
The filmmakers have something.
Yeah, no, I just have one thing that I wanted to put out there, and because we're talking about two scenarios at the time. There's the real thing, what's going on, the cover-up, but I'm afraid and concerned about the third phenomenon, that it's the counterfeit. I mean, the black operation, the manifestation, the full second coming, the manufacturer